hoped to come here a few weeks ago and tell you why I'm running. You might have heard it at the fairgrounds on the July 4th weekend. But I'm here to tell you, in a brief sense, why I'm not running, and why it relates to the city of Alachua, and why you need to be concerned about the city of Alachua. I'm not running because about a week and a half into my campaign, I went to the city of Alachua on election day to get to know the issues and the people there and to get petitions signed, and a number of people came to me with some very serious concerns. I stated I would go to the election returns that night and watch the ballot count and see what happened. And what I discovered was that they did not follow a single Florida law in counting the ballots. This was not an election run by the supervisor of elections of Alachua County, but by the city officials of Alachua. We then filed a lawsuit challenging the election. A week after that, I began doing public records requests, one of which I did with a tape recorder in my hand, which is perfectly legal, which the city manager, Clovis Watson, who's also the police commissioner, saw, consented to, recognized, and it's all on tape. It hasn't been released to the public yet, but that will happen one day. But I was arrested in City Hall 4 days later under the felony wiretap statute for recording a public official in a public building doing public business. I have not been charged by the state attorney's office, but they have not dropped the charges. They are holding them over me. They now have 4 charges that they're threatening to charge me with, none of which they can win on, but all of which they can cause me a great deal of hassle, taking me through a very, very expensive trial if it goes to trial. Let me just tell you a little bit in a nutshell, sort of one story as to sum up what happened in Alachua to show you how bad it was. On the day of elections, the day before the elections, Clovis Watson, the city manager, police commissioner, stood outside the city hall steps and greeted individuals coming in. One African-American woman came in who he'd known for years, and she was going to pay her utility bill. And Clovis addressed her and said, would she like to vote? Now, there was no early voting going on. They had no early voting. He said, would you like to vote? She said, I'd like to, but the voting's tomorrow. He said, that's okay, you can vote today. She then said, that's great, convenient, but I haven't paid attention to this race. I don't know who's running. I don't know who to vote for. He says, that's okay. You should vote for Mr. Lewis. And this is about 5 feet from where she cast her vote. This is a city official who happens to also be one of the 3 members of the canvassing board. Clovis walked her into Alan Henderson, his deputy clerk's office. He's also the clerk, by the way, and said that she wanted to cast a vote. He didn't ask for her ID. He didn't ask her for anything. He handed her not an absentee ballot with instructions and envelopes and security seals, but a blank ballot. Stood and watched her cast the ballot, had her hand back the ballot to him in his hand. He then placed it in an envelope, which he wrote the details on later, did not seal the envelope, and she left. It gets worse. As she left the office, Clovis met her again, realizing that Mr. Lewis could mean either one of the candidates, James Lewis, who is running for his 40th consecutive year on the Alachua City Commission, and Louis Irby. So he said, did you vote for the right one? She said, I voted for who you told me to, Mr. Lewis. He said, but did you vote for number 1 or number 2? She said, I voted for number 1. He was the first on the ballot. That's the wrong Mr. Lewis. He then had her go back into Alan Henderson's office. She told him that she cast for the wrong Lewis. He took the ballot out of the envelope he placed it in, handed her a new one, tore that one up, and then let her cast in front of him again a new ballot. That, in a nutshell, is how badly this election was run, how corruptly this election was run. Since that time, we've discovered that there were provisional ballots cast. Not one of them was counted. Not one of them was canvassed. They were not even presented to the canvassing board. Clovis Watson, the city manager, police commissioner, city clerk, and canvassing board member, casted an absentee ballot. Only problem is, it was never an absentee ballot approved by the supervisor of elections of Alachua County. He put it in at the last minute after the election was over and added it to the pile. The election results were changed from the precinct results, where Louis Irby won by 9 votes after the absentee ballots were cast, James Lewis, for his 40th consecutive year, had an 18-vote margin of victory. On top of my arrest, I then went to the city commission meetings and began discovering that the city is violating Florida's public records and open meeting laws. Clovis Watson, an unelected official, city manager, is deciding almost every policy adopted in the city of Alachua unilaterally. He places it on a consent agenda, which gets approved before the public ever sees it, without a public hearing, without the public being entitled to participate in the process and to deliberate it, by the passage of the motion to approve the agenda. I stood up at the city commission and raised a point of order, which is perfectly legitimate. In fact, that's the rules of order in that commission. I was physically removed and threatened to be arrested. I am now outlawed and banned from the city of Alachua until the matter of my original arrest is resolved. But nobody's charging me with anything, so I can't do discovery. At this point, I was offered a deal by a member of the state attorney's office through my lawyers that if I agree not to prosecute Clovis Watson, that they will drop all the charges against me and it's all over. And I said no. That means I'm calling their bluff and I might have to defend myself. And that's going to be a costly defense, and that's fine. I'm fine with doing that. But since then, nothing has happened other than the state attorney's office is forcing us to go to mediation. I'm willing to go to mediation if they want to admit their wrongdoings, put it on the table, go public with it, fix the errors of their ways in the past, and compensate the losses of citizens. We can do that, but I don't think that's going to happen. There's a couple things that I had to decide then. I could not run a serious campaign and deal with Alachua, and I believe that Alachua has got to be fixed in Alachua County and Florida and for this country. Because what's going on there is hurting all of us. Seriously hurting. You don't have to live in Alachua. If you live in Alachua County, if you live in the state of Florida, if you're a Democrat, the city of Alachua is hurting you. My other option was to run as an independent because I lost all those months. But I decided, after talking to so many people during the Democratic primary process, that there are a number of Democrats, most Democrats, who want someone to fight for their future and their rights, rather than just electioneering. And so I said I would step out. And on top of that, we had one advantage. In that race, there was still Chuck Chestnut, who I believe is a very rare individual in the sense that he is an honest and caring person. And he does, even if I disagree with what his outcome is, what his vote is, I know he's doing it for the right reasons. And so that gave me the basis to say I should pull out and come here. This brings me to a concern that Ed Jennings raised, and it's something that's very tied to Alachua. There is a very concerted effort by the Republican Party to turn Alachua County red. And this is a very real and very effective campaign that they're running. It's part of the National Republican Party campaign, but they are going full force here in Alachua County. A lot of this is funded with a lot of money coming from the developers who are, if you remember, the city of Alachua in the 1970s was 1 square mile. It is now 43 square miles. It is bigger than Gainesville and has about 6,000 people. And the doors are swung wide open for the developers who are willing to give their money. And when they build all these new homes, who do you think is moving in? Democrats from South Florida or more and more Republicans from South Florida? One of their known objectives is that you will change the demographics of Alachua County from outside of Gainesville inward.